At Sandpiper Cove, the morning came on tiptoe, and the sound of a soft breeze passed over the sleeping shore. Sunlight stroked the palm leaves, and the small waves tapped the tide line like polite guests at a door. A heron stood in the shallows as still as driftwood, and a sandpiper drew quick exclamation marks with its feet. From the rocks, a young crab peered out with bright eyes, and he clicked his little claws in a rhythm that matched his hopeful heart. His name was Snap. He was small and quick, and he liked to carry big ideas in his tidy shell. He was not alone. Pebble, the hermit crab, dragged a shell painted by the sea in speckles of moonlight. Dot, the sandpiper, skittered in small arcs, and every arc spelled the word wonder. Old Shell the turtle breathed like a quiet bellows and blinked slow, wise blinks. Brightwing the gull wheeled overhead, a bright stitch on blue cloth. Mango the beach dog stretched in the shade near the palms, his tongue lolling in pleasant agreement with the day. Even the coconuts seemed ready to listen. Out beyond the last sandbar, a blue speck bobbed. Snap shaded his eyes with the edge of his little claw. The speck became a box riding the shoulders of the waves. It bumped the bar, slid through the gap, and drifted toward shore with a secret tucked under its lid. The box was the color of sky. Ropes hugged it like belts, and a sticker on one side showed an iceberg drawn in friendly lines. Dot hopped close and tipped her head. "It looks like a traveling nest," she chirped. Old Shell climbed a little higher on the sand and sniffed with slow care. "The sticker smells faintly of salt and oranges," he said. Brightwing landed with a proud hop. "It smells like victory," he announced, already imagining the crunch of something special. Mango lifted his head and wagged his tail in lazy curiosity, as if he had been invited to a picnic he could trust. Snap's heart beat with hope. He thought of washed-up hats, of glass in blue and green, of the time a message in a bottle had told him to smile today and pass it on. He tapped the lid with one claw. The box was cooled even in the sun, and a thin fog curled away from a dent in the corner. "Ice," he whispered, tasting the idea like a new word. The whisper felt like a promise that needed gentle hands. He tugged at the rope and Pebble helped, and even Mango ambled over to lend his friendly teeth. The box rolled, bumped, and settled in the shade of the palms where the breeze stitched new patterns in the leaves. Brightwing strutted ahead as if he had summoned it. Old Shell nodded and looked at the sky. "We should be careful with what the sea gives," he said. "Things float here for a reason, and sometimes the reason is larger than our hunger." On the lid, someone had written a short line in tidy letters. "For Reef Clinic," it read. The words puzzled the beach. Dot read them out loud again, her voice a little tremble in the warm air. "For Reef Clinic." Brightwing let out a dismissive caw. "The clinic is across the dunes and along the braided creek and over the little hill where the figs grow," he said with airy certainty. "It is a long way, and this is very heavy. And besides, the sea has delivered it to us. Lucky us, clever us." Snap traced the letters with the tip of a claw. The box was an ice box, he decided. Inside, there might be fish wrapped in frost, or fruit bars captured in sleep, or medicine that needed the cold the way a seed needed water. His heart did a small, brave jump. He thought of the clinic where kind hands washed injured flippers and soothed scraped beaks. He had visited once with Old Shell, who had eggs to check. The clinic had smelled like hope and lemons, and the rooms had hummed with careful kindness. Mango panted thoughtfully. He was gentle by nature and liked most ideas. He pushed his nose against the rope and sighed. Dot chirped a question. "Should we open it, or should we move it, or should we guard it until someone comes?" she asked. Old Shell blinked again and counted the clouds. "A thing with a label should usually go where the label points," he murmured. "Labels are like small signposts that ask us to behave like good neighbors."
Brightwing fluffed his wings in a ripple of impatience. "If there are treats in there, they will melt," he said. "That is the plain truth. If we open it and share quickly, we save the treats from turning sad. If we drag it across the dunes, we will arrive with a box of tears and an apology." He hopped onto the lid and tapped it with his beak. Tap, tap, tap. The cold spoke back in a tiny voice, like the clink of distant bells. Snap felt tugged. He loved the idea of sharing a surprise with his friends. He also loved the idea of doing the right thing. Which idea was the truer kindness, he wondered. Pebble cleared his throat in the formal way hermit crabs used for important matters. "The sea teaches patience," he said. "We wait between waves, and we look both ways near gulls. Perhaps we can open just a little corner, see what is inside, and decide with more wisdom." Old Shell smiled with his eyes. "Seeing is sometimes the friend of patience," he said. The rope knots were tight. Mungo worried at them with his careful teeth, while Snap picked at a stubborn loop. The lid raised a finger's width, and a ribbon of white air rolled out across the sand like a ghost practicing to be kind. Inside were neat rows of something wrapped in bright paper. Colors whispered about strawberries and coconut and lime. Brightwing sang a sharp, happy note. "Treats," he cried. "I could have told you. The box knows the first rule of the beach. The first rule is that hot days become gentler with cold sweets." Dot leaned closer. Her eyes grew round. Each wrapper had a tiny drawing of a palm leaf and a smiling sun. On one corner, the same tidy letters repeated the message, "For Reef Clinic," they said. Snap's whiskers twitched. He lowered the lid gently. The little line of cold that escaped felt like a plea. His heart beat a steady drum of carefulness, the kind of beat that marches toward kindness even when a shortcut sings. "What if we make shade?" he suggested. "What if we dig a nest in the cool sand and cover the box with broad leaves and give it small naps in the breeze? If we can keep it cold, we can carry it to the clinic when the sun is less bossy." Old Shell made a pleased rumble. "That is a plan with 3 legs," he said. "Things with 3 legs stand well, and they walk forward with steady courage." Brightwing tilted his head. "Plans are nice. Eating is nicer." But he looked at Mungo's patient eyes and at Snap's brave little face, and something inside his chest softened like wax near a candle. "I suppose I could look for leaves," he said. Pebble puffed up a little, proud to be helpful. Dot dashed to the grove and returned with palm fronds that whispered secrets when they moved. The friends worked with the kind of quiet that makes a new family out of anyone who holds the same rope. They dug a small hollow in the shade. They lined it with seaweed, cool as green cloud. They lowered the box and tucked it under a quilt of leaves. The breeze curled through and kissed the corners. Brightwing stood guard and practiced heroic stances. Mango chased off a curious iguana with polite barks. Old Shell told the story of the time the sun and the wind had a contest and discovered that warmth convinces more kindly than force. The story fit the day the way a shell fits the small back of a crab. When the tide began to rise, a pair of children appeared at the edge of the cove. They were careful children who had learned to tread lightly near nests and who said hello to the world with their eyes. The girl carried a little notebook with pictures of birds drawn in hopeful lines. The boy wore a hat the color of lemons. They waved and sat near the palms. The girl wrote, a soft smile on her face. The boy's hat made a small shade for Mango, who looked pleased, and thumped his tail like a polite drum. The children noticed the box under its leafy blanket. They read the letters and nodded, and the girl looked toward the path that led to the clinic. The sun leaned higher and touched the fronds with warm thoughts. The sound of the soft breeze passed again, promising a gentle afternoon. Snap felt taller in his shell.
He liked a plan that made everyone a little braver and a little kinder. He looked at the box and imagined it arriving where the label had always asked it to go. In his chest, hope and courage pressed hands. The heat climbed and made the beach smell like warm sugar. Brightwing shifted from foot to foot and recited a list of foods that might be inside the wrappers. He grew dramatic. He compared lime to a green song and coconut to a cloud you can bite. Dot laughed. Pebble pretended to be bored, but his eyes shone. Old Shell rested with the dignified patience that comes from being a book with many chapters. Mango panted and made a pillow of his paws, pleased to be an important corner of the plan. An ibis came to drink at the edge of the creek. She listened and nodded, as if she understood the whole plan without needing the details. A chorus of small fiddler crabs waved their uneven claws like flags. A dragonfly drew a blue line through the air and wrote the word soon. The day did not hurry, and the box stayed quiet under its soft roof. Snap visited it now and then with a careful claw to check that the cold was still singing. Each time he felt that soft song, his heart beat with hope. By mid-afternoon, the sun was a serious storyteller. It told long stories about brightness and time. The shadows listened and tried to grow. Snap stood and looked toward the dunes. He pictured the path to the clinic, the figs with their welcome shade, the bridge over the creek, and the cool room where the box might hum with other coolers. "We can start when the rim of the sun touches the tall palm," he said. Old Shell agreed.
Dot marked a tiny line in the sand beside that palm, and Brightwing saluted it as if it were a flag. Before the chosen moment arrived, the beach met a small test. A group of visitors came along the shore. They laughed kindly. They carried towels and a ball that bounced like a tame planet. They saw the box and the shade and the watching friends. One of them, a boy with a red shirt, reached for the leaf quilt with honest curiosity. Brightwing stepped forward and spoke in his best hosting voice. "We are saving this for the Reef Clinic," he said. The boy paused, then smiled and nodded. His mother smiled too. She took his hand and they offered a bottle of cool water without being asked. Snap drank a tiny sip and felt courage bloom like a small, cool flower. The visitors waved and moved on, leaving the day as they had found it, only a touch softer. The chosen moment arrived at last. The rim of the sun kissed the palm line. The air felt like a promise kept. Snap lifted a corner of the leaf quilt and checked the seam. Cold breathed out, patient and present. He looked at his friends, and every face was steady. His heart beat with hope, and his hope did not feel heavy. It felt like the right kind of work. "Let us carry the box when the breeze turns its page," Old Shell said. The breeze did, and the friends stood. They tightened the rope. They set their feet where help would be needed. Brightwing hopped to the front as a scout. Dot bounced and shook out her feathers. Mango took his corner with gentle teeth. Pebble found a steady grip. Snap took the place where a brave one stands. Not in the front and not in the back, but where he could see his friends and feel the rope.
Sunlight stroked the leaves, and the path over the dunes waited like a ribbon that liked being useful. By early evening, the cove turned to bright silk, and the light played across the water like laughter made of silver. The shade quilt over the icebox breathed with the wind, and cold whispers still curled from the seam when Snap checked with small ceremonial taps. He counted slowly to 10, and each number made him feel responsible and ready. Old Shell rested in a shallow of sand and watched the path that led over the dunes. Dot stitched little commas in the wet margin of the shore. Pebble practiced a knot twice, then practiced again for the pleasure of being prepared. Then the trouble arrived, not like thunder, but like a pebble that starts a slide. 3 gulls from the far rocks descended in a wheeling knot, their eyes bright with interest, and their feet already making choices. They were kin to Brightwing, though not his friends. The leader was a broad bird named Swoop, who wore a necklace of gray and impatience. With him came Flip, who liked to laugh at the wrong part of a story, and Skiff, who was almost kind but often got pulled along by louder voices. They circled, landed, and pretended the landing was an accident. "What is this festival under leaves?" Swoop asked, with a voice made of tin and crumbs. Flip peered and made a delighted noise. Skiff tilted his head. Brightwing stepped forward and tried to make his chest look both generous and large. "A delivery from the sea," he said. "We are keeping it cold so it can be carried to the Reef Clinic when the day is kinder." He kept his tone smooth, but the words felt like new shoes, brave and a little stiff. Swoop clicked his beak. "The only clinic we need is a snack," he said. "Kindness begins with a full belly." He lifted a corner of the leaf. A curl of frost rolled out and kissed the sand. Flip gasped, as if seeing treasure. Skiff murmured that it smelled of lime and distant orchards. Swoop pulled the lid a finger higher. Brightwing hopped to block him. Old Shell raised his head. Dot stood beside Snap, and their small shadows joined hands like a promise made of shade. "Read the words," Old Shell said gently. Swoop read, and the words did their steady work, even on a brisk heart. "For Reef Clinic." He fluffed his wings unhappily. "Then you had better hurry, or there will be nothing left to deliver," he said. "The sun eats promises." His eyes lingered on the wrappers, as if they were stars he could pull from the sky and pocket without guilt.
Snap spoke softly but firmly. "We made a plan," he said. "We gave the box a bed of cool seaweed. We keep it shaded, and we will carry it when the sun slides down. If we rush and open it now, the box will feel betrayed, and the clinic might be waiting for medicine. If we wait, we might save more than treats." He felt his heart beat with hope again, an even drum that asked him to be brave. Swoop laughed in the way that shakes patience. "Medicine should be marked medicine," he said. "These are treats, and they cannot treat anything but our tongues." Flip laughed too and reached his beak under the leaf. Brightwing moved like a flash and blocked him with an outstretched wing. Skiff sighed and said that waiting was sometimes wise. Swoop scowled at him. "Wisdom grows fat and slow," he said. "I prefer quick thinking, especially when it tastes like strawberry." Old Shell was slow to anger, but his voice deepened as a distant drum. "Quick is not always kind," he said. "The ocean trusts us with what it brings. If we take without thought, we tear little holes in the trust, and trust does not mend easily." Swoop rolled his eyes, but he looked toward the children and paused. The girl watched with calm attention and no fear. The boy tilted his lemon hat and whispered to Mango, who wagged, and the dog's wag said people were watching and believing in patience. A small shout danced over the dunes. From the path came a figure leaping with open arms. It was Reef, the young helper from the clinic, whose name and the clinic's name had been born at the same moment. He ran like a tide, swift and certain. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder and a map in his hand. He arrived breathless and shining. His smile was a boat that carried gratitude. "I have been looking for you," he told the box, as if speaking to a dear friend. "The ocean radio said a cooler had gone wandering, and the wind pushed your footprints toward my feet." The beach breathed out as one. Swoop blinked. Flip closed his beak. Skiff nodded, his heart folding toward the side of kindness. Brightwing looked as if a weight had flown off his back. Snap felt tall enough to see over the dunes without climbing. Reef touched the lid, then touched his chest in thanks. "You kept it shaded," he said. "Good thinking. Can you help me carry it, friends? The clinic is not far if we walk steady and rest in the fig shade."
"We can help," Snap said at once. His voice chipped the air like a strong little chisel. Pebble stepped forward. Dot bobbed. Mango wagged his whole self. Old Shell began to rise with slow readiness. Brightwing puffed his feathers and said he would scout the air for trouble. The children stood, and the girl tucked her notebook away. The boy adjusted his hat and grinned like a banner in the wind. Swoop opened his beak, then closed it.
then opened it again slower. "I suppose we can carry something also," he said, as if agreeing with kindness did not bruise his pride. They wrapped the rope around the handles. Reef took one side. Snap and Pebble shared another, like two thoughts in the same mind. Mango took a corner with his gentle teeth, and the gulls each found a grip. Dot and the children took turns shading the lid with palm leaves that whispered stories about deep green places. Old Shell walked behind, steady as a moving rock. The path over the dunes was a white ribbon. Sand warmed their steps like friendly hands. Sunlight stroked the leaves. The sound of the soft breeze passed, and it felt like a song, quietly cheering them on. Halfway up, the rope slipped. The box leaned toward a tumble. Snap's heart thumped a quick alarm. Mango braced and held. Reef steadied his side. Skiff darted to support the lower corner. Even Swoop moved without being asked. The box settled again like a child soothed from a bad dream. "Thank you," Snap said to Swoop, and he meant it. Swoop had not been thanked in many days, and the word felt clean and bright. He looked different from the inside out for a moment, like a cloud learning how to be a window. They reached the figs, and the shade was the kind that stories love. Reef passed around canteens of cool water. The friends rested, and the talk was easy. Brightwing told a joke that did not land, and everyone laughed anyway because his courage was charming. The children shared slices of Mango, and Mango the dog felt honored by the name game. Old Shell closed his eyes and hummed a note that was almost a song. The icebox waited quietly, patient in its leafy shawl, and the wrappers inside dreamed their sweet, quiet dreams. Then a new kind of trouble showed itself. A black cloud rose over the inland ridge. The wind came thin and quick. A scent of iron whispered from the distance. Reef stood and listened. "Storm," he said. "If we are caught on the high curve of the dunes, the rain will turn the sand to slipping soup. We will need another way." "The creek path," the girl suggested, pointing with calm certainty. "It is longer but flatter, and the mangroves will break the wind." Reef nodded. "Good idea." They lifted together again. Skiff said he liked the sound of mangroves because it sounded like the sea speaking through trees. They turned toward the creek, and the mangroves welcomed them with the color of deep stories. Crabs watched from their doorways with polite curiosity, nodding like neighbors on a porch. The path tangled, but stayed gentle. The breeze thickened with purpose. Snap walked with his chin up. He felt like a brave one carrying a kind promise. Brightwing flew ahead and reported back. "The water is rising a little," he said, "but the footbridge is still friendly, and the planks hum like a helpful choir." Near the bridge, they heard a cry. It was thin as a reed whistle. They found the sound in a shallow pool where the creek had slipped from its banks. A small stingray lay trapped in the warm puddle, its tail cutting soft lines of worry in the sand. Its eyes glimmered with uncomfortable heat. Reef knelt at once. He wet a cloth from his pack, but the water in the pool felt like soup. He looked at the icebox, then at the ray, then at the creek that ran cooler a few steps away. His face held the map of a decision. He spoke gently. "We could use a little ice to cool this pool," he said. "It would make the water kind again and give the ray strength to move. We do not have much time before the storm. If we open the box a small, careful inch, we can help without losing our duty." He looked at the group, not asking for permission, but for companionship. Snap nodded. Old Shell nodded. Dot nodded. Pebble raised his small claw like a lantern. Even Swoop nodded after an extra heartbeat. Flip looked uneasy, but agreed. Skiff was already scooping sand to deepen the cool corner. They opened the lid a breath. Reef took 2 small bags of ice, tucked between the treats like hidden kindness. He slipped the ice under the cloth in the pool. A sigh rose from the water, as if the day itself exhaled. The ray quivered with relief, then stilled like a hand relaxing. Reef lifted the ray on the wet cloth with careful hands, and together they slid it back to the cooler curve of the creek.
The ray paused, drew strength, and rippled away with a shy flick of gratitude. The sound of the soft breeze passed, and even the storm held its breath for a moment. They closed the lid tight and tied the rope again with a knot Old Shell approved. The sky darkened, but the mangroves held the wind with gentle stubbornness. The rain began to patter, not like a threat, but like a poem thinking on paper. Under the leaves, the group walked on. The bridge welcomed them with a humming board. Beyond the bridge, the clinic roof shone like a friendly shell. Reef pointed. "Almost there," he said. Snap's heart danced the lil dance of hope that knows its own tune. At the clinic gate, the helpers came with busy hands and grateful eyes. They saw the box and cheered in quiet voices so the resting patients would not be startled. They lifted the box onto a rolling cart. "Thank you," Reef said to his friends. "Thank you to every hand and paw and claw and wing." He looked at Swoop and added an extra thank you. Swoop stood a bit taller. He tried not to preen, but could not quite help a small shine. Inside, the coolers hummed a welcome song. The box settled in, and the lid opened under kind light. The treats were there, but so were small packs of medicine that asked the cold to be its friend. Reef's eyes softened with relief. "We will be able to soothe hot fevers and keep the rescue pool steady," he said. He turned to the group with a thoughtful smile. "There will be enough cold to make a few icy fruit sticks for helpers later. If you return after the storm, you may find a surprise." Brightwing made a show of not caring, which only meant he cared in a brand new way. They left the clinic lighter than they had arrived, even though they carried nothing but the memory of doing a thing together. The rain wrote wet music on the path. Sunlight found holes in the clouds and painted coins on the ground. Snap felt the day settle in his shell like a story settling into a book. They returned to the figs to wait out the hardest rain, and everything smelled like green tea and new laundry. Even Swoop told a story about a time he had shared a single sardine with the younger bird. The others listened and did not tease him. The storm passed, and the creek sang softly to itself. The morning after the storm arrived washed and new. The air wore a clean shirt. The sea smiled with small dimples, pleased to have had a good cry and a good sleep. Sunlight stroked the leaves with gentle fingers. The sound of the soft breeze passed over the cove and carried a secret that was not trying very hard to be a secret. The friends gathered where the sand remembered their footprints, and they looked toward the path to the clinic with hearts that tapped a hopeful rhythm. Reef came before noon with an easy stride and the glow of a job that fit the day. He carried a small, insulated bag and wore the grin of someone about to keep a promise. He waved, and the bag waved with him. "Inside are thank yous that you can taste," he said. He sat in the shade and opened the bag with theater, but not too much theater, because kindness already knows how to be bright without help. Inside were frozen fruit sticks in wrappers printed with palm leaves and a small sun. Each stick had a little ribbon like a smile. "You kept the cold where it was needed most," Reef said. "That made room for us to send a little cold back to you." There is coconut for Old Shell, mango for Mango, because that joke never gets old, lime for Dot, who stitches bright lines across the day, strawberry for Pebble, who carries a red roof, and 2 for Brightwing, because he guarded a hard plan with a soft heart. Snap, there is a special one for you, a swirled treat of all the flavors, because you held the idea together. Swoop, Flip, and Skiff, there are treats for you as well, because help deserves sweetness even when it arrives late. Swoop looked surprised, then vaguely embarrassed, then sincerely pleased. He accepted his treat with a nod that meant more than it looked. Flip giggled in a better place inside his own laughter. Skiff smiled and said that his heart felt like a boat with the right number of oars. Old Shell bit into coconut, closed his eyes, and hummed like a small engine that pulled a long, warm train. Mango waited until Reef said go, then took his mango stick very carefully, teeth like polite doors. Dot pecked her lime and danced 3 neat steps. Pebble leaned against his shell as if it were a chair and sighed the sigh of a crab who knew he had chosen well.
Brightwing balanced two sticks with comic dignity. One was for now, one for later, he announced, with wisdom recently learned. Snap unwrapped his swirled treat. Colors curled like sea foam in sunset. He tasted it, and his heart beat with hope, in a quieter way, like a cat purring inside a seashell. The treats were cold, but not unfriendly. Sweet, but not bossy. The friends ate slowly, because slow eating tells the moment it is welcome to stay. Reef stayed too. He told them how the ice had kept the rescue pool polite for a worried seal whose breath had been tight. He told them how the medicine had ridden the cold like heroes on a fast horse to reach patients in time. The clinic had hummed like a hive, but a kind hive, where every buzz was helpful. He spoke of the way the ray had been seen later near the mangrove roots, smooth and sure. The beach listened, and the story became part of its sand. Even the shells seemed to lean closer as the words found their places. Then Reef took something else from his bag. It was a small, simple sign made of driftwood and painted with careful joy. The sign read, "Icebox Beach," in friendly letters, and underneath in smaller letters it said, "Treat comes after duty." He asked if he might place it near the palms where the shade had kept the box from weeping too soon. The friends agreed with hearts that had learned a steady lesson. Brightwing even found a spot where it could be seen without shouting. Old Shell pressed it into the sand with the slow strength of a wave that never gives up. The cove changed in little ways after that. When the tide brought gifts, the gifts were greeted with curiosity and care. Mango nosed them gently. Snap read labels like stories. Dot traced letters in the wet sand until she knew their music. Pebble practiced knots until a knot knew it had a purpose. Brightwing became notorious for advising patients as if he had invented it. Swoop and his two companions visited sometimes with better manners, and when they forgot, the sign tilted its friendly reminder and they remembered again. Sometimes the children came, and the girl drew the sign with tiny, careful strokes while the boy sketched Mango's grin. They brought their grandfather once, an old fisherman whose net had retired to a museum in the village hall. He read the sign out loud and smiled with the kind of smile that ties itself around a day. Then he told them a story about another time and another beach when a box of seeds had washed ashore after a storm. The villagers had decided to plant the seeds rather than roast them with haste. Their patience became a grove, and the grove held birds like a song holds notes. One evening, a school group came to the clinic, and Reef led them on a walk to Icebox Beach. The wind had a freshly rained-on taste. Sunlight stroked the leaves with the soft, long strokes of late day. The sea breathed like a big dog in a dream. Reef told the story of the wandering cooler, the march across the dunes, the ray rescue, and the simple truth that a treat tastes sweeter when it waits for the right time. The children listened with that open silence that makes stories grow taller. They fed Mango a gentle biscuit, and Mango sat with kingly posture as if the biscuit had knighted him. As the months gently turned the pages of the year, a heat wave visited the coast. The sand tried to shine too brightly. The coconut palms lifted their fronds like fans. The waves arrived as if they were sighing under a warm blanket. Visitors came to the beach carrying coolers with sensible amounts of ice inside. Many of them had learned to pack an extra cloth and a shade for the cooler, and a few had even written their destination on the lid. Snap liked reading those lids. He felt like a postman who read letters only long enough to guide them safely home. One day, during the heat spell, a small crisis arrived like a question that wants a hug. A baby pelican at the clinic shook with fever, and the rescue pool's chill wanted help. The clinic had ice, but not enough for comfort. Reef jogged to the beach and asked if anyone had a small stash. The beach looked at one another and then at the visitors resting under umbrellas that looked like polite mushrooms. A family with a straw hat for each person heard the request and opened their cooler. They had packed more ice than they needed. Without fuss, they poured a bag into Reef's insulated tub. Others followed until the tub laughed with cold. The baby pelican settled, and the pool sang low and kind again. Reef came back to the beach with a smile and a smaller bag this time, because gratitude can be carried in any size. He handed out more fruit sticks on ribbons to the families who had shared. The ribbons whispered the same word over and over: together. The grandmother tied a ribbon to her hat and declared herself the icebox volunteer of the day. The beach clapped quietly so as not to scare the gulls. Brightwing was not scared. He bowed as if he had invented the word volunteer and wanted to share it properly. Not every day carried a banner. Some days were simple. Snap watched the tide erase an argument between two shells. Dot found a feather and felt like a poet. Pebble polished his roof and felt capable in a way that did not need applause. Mango learned the limits of his bark volume near sleeping babies. Old Shell tried a new path to the far rocks and discovered he liked it best when he could hear the clinic's distant hum.
Brightwing stole a French fry once and returned it with apologies before anyone noticed, which is an impossible miracle, but the day forgave him because practice makes better. At the end of the heat wave, a cold night came like a guest with perfect timing. Stars appeared with crisp edges. The sea wore sequins that did not try to impress anyone. The friends gathered near the sign and told the story again, not because they had forgotten it, but because telling it polished it. Snap spoke of the moment the lid had first lifted and the white ribbon of air had curled out like a gentle ghost. Pebble described the knot that had held firm against a slippery hill. Dot recalled the pool and the ray and the way relief had made the water breathe. Old Shell said the best part had been the waiting, because waiting had made room for wisdom to arrive without rushing. One clear morning, a new box drifted in. It was smaller and red and had a label written in the looped script of a distant town. It was not for the clinic, but it was addressed to a beach cleanup crew doing work near the old pier. The crew was missing, probably delayed by a flat tire. The beach knew what to do without a meeting. They shaded the box, they kept it cool. When the crew arrived, dusty and apologetic, the box was still ready to be itself. The crew leader read the sign and laughed in admiration. He promised to paint the same reminder on their own coolers, and everyone liked that promise. On a day of ordinary light, the friends found a piece of driftwood that wanted to be something. They carved with shell edges and careful pecks. They made a second sign for the clinic path. It said, "Cooler heads, warmer hearts," with friendly letters that Reef called handsome. The signs became a pair, like two elder neighbors who always agree loudly about the best way to be kind. The path between them felt like a promise kept in both directions, and walking it made a heart sit up straighter. The beach grew sweeter because no one tried too hard to make it sweet. People and creatures noticed more and hurried less. The waves kept telling their old stories, and everyone listened as if they were new. When a gift drifted in, it was met with the thought that someone else might be waiting for it. When a treat asked for a moment, it was given that moment, and the taste that followed felt like more than flavor. It felt like the warmth that lives in a good choice. On the last afternoon of the season, when visitors were folding umbrellas with the air of people making slow farewells, Snap sat with Reef where the shade cut a neat triangle on the sand. They watched Brightwing teach a younger gull how to hover without bragging. They watched Old Shell draw a map for small turtles who would soon begin their first night road to the moonlit line. They watched Mango fall asleep in the middle of wagging. The sound of the soft breeze passed, and there was a hush inside it, like a page turning itself. Snap looked at the clinic, then at the sea, then at the sign. He felt a quiet glow. He was a little one, but he had been a brave one, and the brave part was the part that listened. He said this out loud to Reef, without embarrassment. Reef nodded as if that was the kind of sentence a day needed. He handed Snap a ribbon from the treat bag, green like the leaves that had made shade when shade mattered most. Snap tied it around a small stick and planted it by his burrow. It made a tiny sound when the breeze passed, a sound that said, yes. Even when no cooler washed up, the cove felt like a place where a cooler might be welcome. The world is often warmer than it needs to be, Old Shell said once, half to himself, half to a hermit crab who had wandered near. A little shade, a little patience, a little thought for where a gift belongs, and everything grows gentler. Dot wrote those words in the wet sand. The tide read them and nodded and took them out to sea to share. Somewhere far away, a small island felt a little kinder that day, though it could not say exactly why. The sun moved toward evening. Sunlight stroked the leaves one more time with long paintbrush hands. The sign threw a short shadow shaped like the word yes. The friends sat in that shadow for a while and did not hurry to stand. They liked the feeling of a day that had chosen its own ending. Sometimes a story does not need a bow on top. Sometimes it just needs a last breeze, a last look, and a band of old friends who know what a treat is for and where it belongs.